There are many different stances that you can do on a flowboard. You can ride it like a snowboard, you can ride it like a surfboard, or you can ride it like a skateboard. But one of these stances is far superior to all the others. If you want to get your sharpest carving, your highest ollies, and the best control you can have, then you want to ride it like a skateboard. In fact, that's why all of the pros ride that kind of stance. So today we're going to show you exactly where to place your feet in this stance and why it has so many advantages over all the other stances. So if this interests you, stick around and we'll show you everything. Hey Flowboarders, if you're new to this channel, my name is Andy Broder and I'm a two-time National Flowboard Tour Champion in the Masters Division. I've had the privilege of riding with some of the best flowboarders in the world, and I created this instructional channel to make you a better flowboarder by showing you the best tricks and tips that I've learned over the years. These videos are basically the videos that I wish I had when I first started riding. Today we're going to be talking about the most basic thing there is, stances. A great stance will allow you limitless progression, while a bad stance will severely constrain your riding. This is the most basic thing to learn, but it's so important to have a strong foundation. Then we'll be moving on to bigger and better things. So let's get started. Before we get to the details of the skateboard stance, let's get three terms out of the way: regular, goofy, and switch. These three terms deal with which direction your body is facing when you're riding. When you ride regular, then you have your right foot on the tail and your left foot in front. Riding goofy is the opposite, where your left foot is on the tail and your right foot is forward. Ride whichever way feels most comfortable to you. Then there's this term switch. What's that? Switch riding is just riding in the opposite direction of what you normally ride. So if you're normally a regular stance rider, once you swing your board around, now you're riding in switch, which is now a goofy stance with your left foot on the tail, and vice versa. So switch is really the weaker direction that you ride in. Why is this so important? Two reasons. The first reason is getting great balance while riding backwards will make your overall riding so much better. A lot of tricks have to be landed backwards, so getting good at riding switch will make those backwards landings easier and you'll ride away cleaner. Also, doing tricks in switch is much harder than your normal stance, so when they're done in competition, judges give you higher scores. It's one thing to be able to do a shove it, but can you do a switch shove it? That's a much harder trick. So if you can, take some time and learn how to ride switch. So now let's get into types of stances. There are three basic stances that you can do on a flowboard: snowboard stances, surfing stances, and skateboard stances. A snowboard stance is where you have both of your feet symmetrically centered in the middle of the board. A surfing stance is where you have your back foot at least a few inches from the back edge of the board. A skateboard stance is where your back foot is close to the back edge of the board with maybe about a ½ inch of board showing. So here's the important part. The skateboard stance is the best stance if you want to get the maximum performance out of your flowboard riding. Using a skateboard stance is going to make everything easier in your flowboard world. The reason for this is that with a flowboard, all of the control is in the back edges. So you need to get your back foot all the way to the back of the board so you can best control those turning edges with your toes and your heel right on top of them. Now let's talk about where you want to place your feet for the skateboard stance, and then later we'll talk about why you want to place them there. This is where you want to put your feet for a skateboard stance. Let's look at the back foot first. What you need to understand is that with a flowboard, all of your turning is done with the back edges of the flowboard. So you need to get your toes and your heel directly on top of those turning edges to have the maximum control. The biggest mistake that I see people making is placing their rear foot too far forward so that they're not on top of their turning edges and not using them efficiently. When you get your foot all the way to the back of the board, there should only be about a ½ inch to 3/4 of an inch sticking out behind your foot. Also notice that the board narrows as it goes towards the tail. So what's going to happen is when you get your foot all the way to the back of the board, your toes are going to be sticking off the edge a little bit. And due to the curvature of the board and also the curvature of your toes, what's going to happen is they're both going to line up very nicely there. Now this is an important point. Your toes are actually going to be grabbing the top edge of that flow board. They're not going to be hanging off into the water real deep, but actually they're just going to be grabbing a little bit of that top edge. And then once again, your heel should be hanging over the heel edge of the board so that you have good control of that heel edge also. Now let's talk about the front foot. Your front foot should be a little bit more than shoulder length apart from your back foot. To find the best width for your feet, what you want to do is you want to first get your back foot into proper position on the tail, and then place your front foot so that you are standing shoulder width apart. Then start sliding your front foot forward until it feels comfortable to you. I like a narrow stance, but other people like a wider stance. It's whatever makes you feel comfortable. Don't go too narrow because that's unstable. Also, don't go too wide because you lose control. Now, this is a really important point. Where does your front foot go side to side? You would think that it should be centered, but it's not. What you need to do is you need to line up the heel of your front foot with the heel edge of the board. So check out this photo. This is the current women's world champion, Annie Flynn, and she rides a Mac board, which is 12 inches wide, and she has little feet. Check out how she lines up her foot. Her heel is exactly in line with the edge of the board, and between the opposite edge of the board and her toes, there is a large gap. This is a narrower outlaw board, so when I put my feet on here, there's really only about that much space that's showing there. I usually ride an ash board, so I usually wind up with about an inch of space between my toe and the edge of the board. Now, with whatever kind of board you're riding, the alignment is always done on this heel side. It's not done with the toe side. Whatever gap in space there is, that's fine. That's just how it's going to be. So why is it your heel edge that's lining up with the board like this? What I found is that if my front foot's heel isn't near the edge, like it's more centered on the board, when I try to do a hard cut to my heel side, it's very hard to get a good edge, and my board tends to slide out from under me. But if I correct the position of my front foot and get that heel close to the board edge, then that really helps me hold the edge when I'm digging into the turn. Now when we go to the opposite side, it's different on the toe side. Even though the toe of my front foot isn't near the edge and there's a gap, my back foot will compensate for it and I'll still get fantastic edge control. In any event, this is where all of the pros put their feet. So this is where your feet need to be for performance riding. Now, here's the last little adjustment that you want to make. When you see beginners riding, you'll see them with their feet perfectly straight across the board. This is a really unnatural stance, and it feels awkward, and it feels almost like you're a little pigeon-toed. You really want to stand relaxed, like you're just waiting in line at the store. So what you want to do is turn your feet out a little bit and find what is most comfortable to you. Okay, so we talked about where to put our feet on the board for a good skateboard stance. Now let's talk about probably the most important part of this video, which is the reason why we put our feet to the back here. So there are four main reasons. The first one is carving, the second one is ollies, the third one is board rotation, and the fourth one is foot adjustments. So first of all, carving. We already spoke about this a little bit. Your turning edges on a flowboard are the back edges here, so you need to get your foot directly over those turning edges. So can you carve fine with your foot further up on the back of the board? Yeah, you can, but what happens is the further your foot goes up on the board, as you carve, your board gets a lot looser and tends to slide out on you. All right, second, and this is really important, ollies. Ollies are the most important trick to get to those higher levels of flowboarding. You need to get your board to pop out of the water when you're doing tricks. But how do you make your board pop out of the water? It's all about two things. It's the angle of the board and also the water pressure hitting it. Let me show you. So this here is your board riding on top of the water, and this is the water current going underneath it. What you need to do is you need to get an angle to the board. When you get that angle, what happens is the pressure of the water pushes into that board, actually builds up for a little second there under you. And what happens is with that pressure, the board has nowhere to go except upward. It's just forced out of the water. So whether it's an ollie or a fast plant, that's how you get the board out of the water. It's water pressure and the angle of the board. So that being said, when I bring my foot all the way to the back of the board, this is where I'm going to get the best leverage to get that angle the easiest. Now, can I ollie with my foot further up the board here? Yeah, I can do it. Problem is that I get less angle, and the less angle that I get, the less upward force I'm going to get. Now, it's that upward force that gives me the higher ollies, and it also gives me greater control of the ollies. So for better ollies, once again, get your foot to the back of that board. Third, board rotation. We talked before about getting your toes to grab that upper edge of the board there. That's really important because when you're doing a shove it, it helps to grab that board so that you can twist it around. Or if you're doing a 180 ollie, when you're up in the air, you can pull that board around with your toes. Now, it's not absolutely necessary to get that edge control when you're doing those tricks, but having that little itty bitty bit of edge control there helps you just pull that board around. It helps you get more torque. So you want to use that to your advantage. Fourth, foot adjustments. As you're riding, your back foot is constantly moving around a little bit. And then also you're going to be doing release tricks. And then when you land your foot back on the board, it's never going to be in the correct position. So you're going to need to readjust that all the time. Without looking at your board, you can actually work your feet back and you can feel the side edges there so that you line your toes up with that edge, as we were talking about earlier in the video. Now, honestly, most of the time when I do my foot adjustments, I'm looking down at my board to do them. But what happens is sometimes I have to concentrate on where I am on the wave and I can't look down. So what I need to do is move my feet and just do it all by feel. I need to do that blind adjustment. The other day I was teaching a flow guard how to ride who was doing pretty well when I got there. I pulled him aside for a minute and readjusted his feet to where they should be. When he got done with his next run, he came off the wave and he had that "I've just seen the light" look in his eyes. And he told me how much more control he had of his board. It works. So get your foot to the back of the board. The back of the board is where it's at. Now that you got all this information, get off the couch, get out to your local wave, and give this stuff a try. Try to push yourself, try to learn some of this stuff, but most of all, have a great time. We'll see you on the next video.